If you're wanting to buy a subject to deal in this market, I'm talking about keeping a 2, 3, or 4% interest loan that the seller has, keeping it in place, buying the deal and making it make sense. Again, with those numbers, it is imperative that you learn how to do those deals safely. Just watching a YouTube video a few times won't help. And guys, I'm telling you, there's even a lot of folks out there teaching about subject to that they don't know how to do them safely. I've been an experienced crave investor for years now, and it is painfully obvious that there's a lot of folks who are doing these deals wrong. We're seeing it across the nation. I'm definitely seeing it in my backyard. And so I am actually, because of everything that I'm seeing, the defaults, the subject to defaults where investors bought deals they should have never bought in the first place, all of these things, I'm calling an emergency masterclass on the topic of how to do a subject to deal safely. It's going to be August 17th, 2024 in New Orleans, and it's going to be a more intimate setting, kind of like a masterclass mastermind, where it's going to be in a house, not a big hotel room. And guys, it's important that you learn how to do these deals safely. My goal is to get you in there for an entire day, teach you as much as I possibly can, and give you a manual to walk away with. If you're interested in more information on how to do these deals safely, go ahead, go to CourtneyFricke.com for more information, or DM me the word subject to masterclass. Y'all stay safe out there. Hey, welcome to the Strategic Success Podcast. I'm your host, Courtney Fricke. Thanks for tuning in. Well, hey guys, welcome to the show. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Strategic Success Podcast. So I'm here with two good friends, Clark and Lisa. You guys, thanks so much for, first of all, joining me today. I'm looking forward to this conversation, getting people introduced to you. So let's first start off, tell the people kind of a little bit about who you are and where are you based out of and what do you do?
Okay. You want to start?
You can give the female version,
Okay.
I'll correct.
Okay, That's it. All right. We are just outside of Atlanta, north of Atlanta. We've been here since 1999, minus a 6-year stint in DC for 6 years. But we always wanted to come back here. This was the goal. And we love it here. And I hope I die and I'm buried in my backyard.
From the West, she's from Salt Lake. My
Yeah.
family's in Vegas, but my family moved around about every 4 years growing up.
Okay.
Military. And we've just loved the South.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Fantastic
awesome.
area.
So, so you guys, talk to me about what got you into real estate investing, because y'all's background, y'all have varying different backgrounds, right? But what got you into investing, and then we'll kind of start talking about some of those pivotal moments over the years, you know, in your investing.
Okay.
I think part of it was just honestly during our courtship or shortly after our marriage. We met in college and living in Provo, Utah, college town, had nothing. We were both, raised in great households, loving parents, no sob stories to tell, rags to riches kind of thing, but they were homes that didn't have excess at all. And we were kind of on our own at 18, basically, through our college experience and stuff. We married just before grad school. But even in those days, we would walk the neighborhoods and see these homes that had 6 students in it and think, what would it be like to own a property that had, can you imagine how much money that is? And we'd mentally be calculating each house as we walked by it, kind of thing. And I think something early on, I had read a Robert Allen book around high school time and thought, well, people make money in real estate. And I'd been introduced to this constellation of young professionals that I admired. I found out they were all attorneys and all very sharp, but they seemed comfortable in this world of talking about money and stuff in a way that I don't think either of us were.
Yeah.
And in time we got there. But early on we kind of thought that real estate would play a role in our future, and it seemed like a path to freedom that at that point just seemed hard to imagine.
And we were living in a little teeny basement apartment, and basically, paycheck to paycheck is putting it very nicely. And we didn't have much, so I remember making do with what we had, and we just said, okay, well, we don't want to go into debt, but how can we? If we do go into debt, what kind is that good debt? and we looked at real estate for that.
So, all right, so you're seeing it as a source of potential, wealth building and things. It sounds like you were reading some books. So you mentioned Robert Allen and some things like that. So talk to me, what did y'all's first deal look like? We all stumble through deals, right? Especially early on, and even still sometimes. But what did that look like for you guys? What did that teach y'all? What did it open up?
Well, we probably have a different timeline on it. I did joint degrees in law and management and briefly practiced law, but only kind of part-time because I'd started a tech company back in the 90s. It was all very small stuff at that point, but my career was kind of a fluke in time in that there weren't a lot of attorneys back then that were trilingual in law, technology, and business. But when we were in Salt Lake, I came across a deal with we ended up buying a whole bunch of timeshares from a guy. And we probably both look back on that and laugh. That went nowhere.
Fail. Don't do that.
So I hate to do this, but for someone who might be watching this, and like for example, I'm thinking of my 18, 19-year-old niece, who's like, "What's a timeshare?"
These were apartments,
we all
basically.
know that they were a big deal back then, but
Yes.
Yeah. So you could buy an apartment, but a slice you could only use it during certain periods of the year. And these were all up in
Yeah.
So it's fractional ownership,
Yeah.
and these were all up in Park City, which we thought was going to be some big deal. So we laugh about it looking back, but we went on and we went into a career that was exceptionally hard, and it was a pivotal time as we were transitioning into the digital age and law and stuff like that. But it was one of these careers that, kind of like the NFL, you got 7 years of life in you, and you darn well better have something else in place. And we knew pretty quickly that it wasn't really compatible with our values, even if I were able to survive it. I was replaced by 3.5 people. First time we were here in Atlanta when I left that firm, and then went up to DC and New York and stuff in bigger places. And so we knew that wasn't sustainable, and we had a longer run on that. But we had the good fortune right before we left Atlanta of meeting a fellow who became one of the largest purchasers of homes at foreclosure sales, auction, courthouse step kind of stuff. And so income wasn't our problem in those days working at that kind of big firm. But
so you guys had, corporate jobs, your income, your W-2 income was fine. It was a matter of, you were saying, hey, how can we not necessarily escape that, but how can we think beyond that?
Yes. That's a good way to put it.
She was raising the children, and I was working.
Okay.
And but we knew there needed to be something different, and we wanted other investments. We wanted to return to Atlanta. And the nice thing in that relationship was that in addition to funding him, we arranged that we could cherry pick deal flow. And so
let's break that down. So you met this guy. Was he a flipper? Was he a landlord? Was he a little bit of everything?
A little bit of everything.
All right. So he's one of the largest buyers. Yeah, he became the largest buyer at the courthouse steps. So this is the big dog who's out there doing volume. And so you started funding him. Short term, long term.
Short term.
Short term. Yeah. So you funded him short term for what he was doing.
And then he would do his BRRRR deal afterwards.
So he would go refinance out. So he'd do that BRRRR method where he'd buy it, get it all stabilized with rented out after renovating it, and then refinance you guys out. So that was the short term for his rentals, but then his flips would be short term just because of nature.
Yep.
The deal was short term. But then you built in, but before we get into the icing on the top, how did you meet him? Did, like that type of relationship is,
Actually, we had church responsibilities that were similar.
Okay.
He wasn't in our congregation or anything, but he was in the region, and we'd had some interaction. I'd heard he was doing something real estate, so I called him one day and said, what is it you're really doing?
Yeah.
We've interacted in another context, and he shared, and he let me ride along, one day, and I said, we'd like to acquire and do some things. He says, well, I need some money. I says, well, that's not our problem right now.
Yeah.
Our problem is we know that we're not going to be in this kind of thing long term. We want to return to Atlanta, and so one thing led to another.
So wait, was he so he was doing that here in Atlanta?
Yes.
Okay. So something that's critical, number one, it was your curiosity. Like, hey, I just heard you were doing something. I mean, he could have been a realtor for, he could have been whatever, but maybe you had heard more that he was, taking down these houses, whatever. but it's that curiosity, and I know that curiosity is one of those clues towards success, is like that there's that level of, hey, I'm curious to find out more. Some people just don't take that first step, right?
Well, it's not being afraid to ask the question. What I have found in
Exactly.
life and what I tell younger people is, if you just ask the question
Right.
and you don't abuse people's time, you'll find that most people want to help you.
Right.
If they
They'll
see that
open
you're
up, yeah.
sincere.
If they see that you're sincere and you're really going to take their advice and you're really going to progress, don't spend their time.
Yeah.
Or their wheels. Don't waste their time. Let them. But if you're earnest, people want to help you.
Exactly. And especially when people are wanting to better themselves and they're respectful.
Yes.
They're saying, hey, look, I'm like, absolutely, we open up. That was yesterday here at you guys' lake house with that young couple who had these questions. I was like, hey, I'm more than happy to answer all of your questions because they're wanting to better themselves.
Yep.
They're respectful of it and all that. So absolutely. So you're asking him and saying, hey, we want to do something like this. And then he turns back and says, hey, well, I'm in need of some capital. And then you guys found an opening to where you say, hey, well, I can help with that. And I want to highlight that because you were saying, hey, we want to own some assets, but lending was a different path. But you say, this can get my foot in the door. This can help us get some experience with it. This can help us with, and I think that's critical because so many people think, well, I want to own rental. So if I don't, my first deal isn't owning a rental, I'm doing this wrong.
And it's
You know what I'm
not,
saying?
yeah.
Yeah, and
there's
that's-
so many things that intertwine with real estate, whether that's selling real estate or lending for real estate. Any of those things can all help. Whether it's staging for real estate, all those things can help find good deals, but they don't always have to be the same deal.
Right.
But you're making a good point. We were able to learn, in effect, through him.
Yeah.
We had already established credibility, so that first conversation wasn't a cold call.
Yeah.
He
It
knew
was an
we were.
existing relationship, yeah.
He knew we were serious people, and he was, and mutual respect there. And but we were learning over his shoulder because we would quiz him each month. Okay, you need how much money? All right, and what's your target this month, and what are you looking for, and what kinds of properties? All right, what's your strategy with these ones? Okay, you're going to do that one, and that's what you're doing to it. I think we'd be interested in that one. And so from afar, we were kind of learning about how he put together his deals, how he was selling them off, how
You're
he
learning
was
as a
profit
team member,
sharing.
right? Effectively a team member, and I love that. I mean,
And even how much is this costing, and why do you spend money here versus here, and what makes the difference?
So he would acquire, rehab the property, and then put it into service with the first tenant, and then Lisa, from afar in DC, would property manage. And
wow.
what we discovered was that and he would provide boots on the ground when we needed it, and would dispatch for repairs or whatever. But what we discovered is that Lisa's natural gifts match very, very well with those skills needed in real estate. And she very forthright in her speaking, holds back, lovely about it. If this works for you, great. If it doesn't, we understand, kind of thing. And she was able to, in time, begin vetting people herself. And by the time we came back here, we had accumulated a significant portfolio, and it gave us options. But she had progressively moved more and more into it. Meanwhile, that was just before the advent of the hedge fund money coming to Atlanta.
Right.
And other people wooed him, added zeros to what we were providing, and he became intoxicated, and we could see that there were some mistakes going to happen in his organization, and so we kind of separated.
Yeah.
But enough of his people had worked with us enough that they wanted to work with us. And so we began taking on projects of our own.
So, okay, so you build this relationship, get to see someone who's doing high volume. You get to cherry pick the deals that you guys wanted to keep as rentals, and you were getting great deals. And then building the relationship with the vendors. Okay, so then the hedge funds, then he goes off and chases that. Okay,
But understand, this is over like 7 years. I mean, this didn't happen like in 3 months. I mean, we did this over about 7 years before we came, or 6.5 years or something like that, before we came back to Atlanta. So this isn't happening, in 3 months, and we need.
it was a ride.
It was
a
a
long
ride,
yeah.
and it takes time. It wasn't something that I learned overnight, and I learned too how to manage those projects and what timeline those came, and what do you do first, and who do you talk to, and why you stay away from certain things too.
Yeah, so we kept the day job during those early years, and we'd come back here on holidays, visit my sister who lived in the area, and we would make a point to, ride the circuit of the properties while we were down here for Thanksgiving or whatever. And so a lot of lessons were able to be learned in that way.
But we came back to Atlanta because we knew we always wanted to be here, and that was about the time, that was in 2010, so we all know the crash.
So a very interesting time in real estate.
Yes.
2010's blue light special.
Oh yeah,
Right?
yeah, and we bought as much as we could then. We literally bought as much as we could.
Yeah, I mean,
Well, not as much, but as much as
As much as
we could agree upon.
we feel
Within
comfortable
capacity.
with
Yeah.
capacity. Yeah.
Well, I think that's smart because a lot of people just say, "Oh, I'll buy everything," but then first of all, when you're faced with the opportunity, people don't always recognize it as the opportunity that it is, and then you have those questions of, "What do I have capacity for?" And if you don't play both offense and defense, if all you do is go, balls to the wall buying everything, there's downfalls to that too.
Correct. Yeah.
So,
Correct.
all right, so you guys bought a good bit property then. So, whenever as you could. So the ones with the previous strategic relationship, and then the ones with when you came back. Talk to me about what was one of y'all's next pivotal moments, after that.
Well, we came back with one set of plans. I wanted to acquire a couple of businesses and some different things like that. And then there were some hardships that hit our family, as hit others, with health and a death on my side of the family and some stuff and some difficulties. And I think as we worked that through, plans and priorities shifted.
Sure.
Lisa threw herself into rehabbing kind of work and discovered she had an amazing talent for it. She's probably got 100 projects behind her at this point, but she speaks Spanish. She was able to run those crews. She was fortunate to have some key contractors who were literal master craftsmen who in time only wanted to work with her because she works so well with them. And they would basically, it was like in a reverse apprenticeship. She's paying them, but they're teaching her to the point where she by far has the greater skills when it comes to rehabbing and seeing what's possible with projects and knowing instantly. So by the time, when I started easing back into it, I was dealing with a lot of the other family stuff. And with the legal background that we started lending quite a bit and lending on a large scale and in multiple states and stuff. We've now pulled all that back. Don't do it to the same extent, but her eyes were very valuable because she'd look at a project and say, okay, this is what that budget ought to be. And
They think it's going to cost 40, but it really is going to be 75 or 80, and that's going to hurt.
She'd bring the dose of reality to it, and then I was able to structure things with the people, and we never viewed ourselves as just selling money as some kind of a hard money lender or something. We viewed ourselves as being more of a strategic ally to the people who were trying to build their businesses. And so there was consultative advice, whether it was for her on projects, product, or consultants, or how to put it together cost-wise, or me from saying, here's things you need to be thinking about financially or growing your business or other stuff.
I think it's fair to say,
it was a value
too,
add.
Yeah, that we learned how to say, oh, let's divide and conquer. This is something,
This is your skill set, this is my skill
Yeah.
set.
And we can help each other or give advice, really, this is what you do and this is what I do, and let's divide and conquer. And it's not just a one-person job. I mean, Clark's dealing with legal issues and bookkeeping issues and tax issues and all the finance stuff. He goes to all the closings. There's some homes that I've bought and sold, he's never even seen them.
Yeah.
He's never even seen them, but he's been to the closing table. He's making sure the money's there to make that money, to make those bills paid, so that the flooring guy is paid, so that everything gets paid.
All that,
So we're really dividing and conquering and trying to find the best way that we work together I don't want to say effortlessly because it's not, it's full of effort, but more seamlessly.
Yeah, I think that's critical because some people they don't divide and conquer and they're just duplicates. And what's the point if there's, it's like the idea of there's too many chiefs, not enough Indians or whatever, or if you're not complementing each other, you're just going to be stepping on each other's toes. And so I do think that that's powerful.
When I was young, my father told me, marry a good woman and get out of her way.
That
And
sounds like good advice.
it was very good advice.
Yeah.
And in Lisa's case, it's get the hell out of her way because you'll get run over. She's just she's a powerhouse
Yeah.
in her own regard.
And I believe it, and I know it. And so you guys are, doing these projects. You're lending. Since pulled a lot of that back, but over all the years, you mostly you bought rentals. You did some lending. Sound like were the rehabs all just for the rentals, or did you flip as well?
Oh no, we did flipping.
Okay.
We did flipping, and what I loved, yeah. And it depended. Some of them were small, but most of them we got bigger.
So
a lot,
so it
a
sounds
lot
like
bigger.
a lot of volume of flipping, or it's just the number of rehabs over the years.
Yeah, probably rehabs and
So it's
flipping
just
over
the
the
number
years.
of renovations have been, and that's the thing, whether you're renovating for a rental, which is different, or renovating for a flip, which is also, they have different purposes.
Or renting or renovating for an Airbnb. They're
whatever
all
that may be.
different.
So, okay, so that's critical because, and I want to get into, a lot of what y'all are doing today too and talk about that, but I think that's important because a lot of people think, oh, well, it's all the same. It's not. Your finishes have to be different, and especially getting into those more furnished, units, it's very different. But over those years, is there anything when you look back that, if there was a lesson that if you could have learned it sooner, you guys would have maybe, I don't want to say found more success but would have been, catapulted further. But was there any type of lesson that you felt like, man, it just took me too long to learn that lesson? What would that be?
Well, there's some lessons I don't think we're yet at that we recognize is that its ability to leverage others more. And we've been fortunate in the teams that we've assembled, not only in the rehab teams and that we've got a phenomenal realtor that we've worked with over time, and we have zero problem paying her as much as she would ever ask, and we send her a ton of business.
Yeah.
And we've got an attorney that we've worked with for about 15 years. We've got some bankers in that I've developed relationship with. I am a big fan of the smart use of lines of credit. Some of those have come from banks. I've developed other lines of credit for us using other financial products, life insurance and other things. And so I think getting the right teams in place is an important one. Staying out of each other's space. We have a practice of having what we call our third Friday meetings, where we come together and we've got a very fixed agenda. Early on, I think coming out of the firm, when we moved back here, it was more because we needed to be on the same page and speaking the same vocabulary. She'd be in the homemaker kind of role, but very energetic in all of her other activities. I'd been in kind of this corporate space running multiple businesses and stuff, and we're trying to merge together, how do we do our own thing? And that was very important for getting a common vocabulary,
And
helping
syncing
her
up.
understand the
syncing
scope
up.
of what we owned, how it was structured, because we've been innovative in terms of how we have legally structured our deals, the kinds of LLCs and company structures we have, and what states they're in, and how they're nested, and things like that. And those were important things should the proverbial bus ever hit me, and vice versa. So we would have an understanding. So we had that regular flow of dialogue. Very early on, we started tracking our finances as if we were running that our household were a business. So it's a consolidated balance sheet across the different lines of business and different companies and stuff. So we could at least quarterly have a clear snapshot and how is this aligning to these goals. We start every one of these third Friday meetings going through our goals, and this is well beyond business. It's life and family goals and things, and it's a way of just touching base. Are we in line? Are we spending our time on the things that will yield the kind of results we want for the kind of family, life, and legacy that we want?
And I think getting back to your question, what did we learn, or what would we have learned, or wish we would have learned earlier on? I think leveraging people and leveraging time.
Yeah.
I mean, we're really in a work situation where we either have to leverage money or we have to leverage time, and we're trying to do both. And that's a hard thing to let go of for some people, you know, like
Right.
control freaks.
Yeah, we're all
Hello.
control freaks.
Hello.
Yeah.
Beep, beep. And I think those are lessons to learn, and I'm still learning.
Yeah.
And those aren't the same. I mean, for her, she needed that control. I came from a background where I'd had hundreds of employees, and I didn't want to be in the details.
Right.
And so we look at those problems quite differently.
Right.
Right.
And that can bring challenges. And if you're not in whatever business partnership you have, communicating really carefully about how you see
Exactly.
the world and challenges and what you're immediately facing, it can be difficult.
Well, and I think that's important. I mean, I've had various different partnerships, and a big part of that has been some that have gone very well, some that have not. And that has been something I've learned over the years. It's critical to understand and to not get into them lightly, right? So I love the idea of these third Friday meetings where you guys are, as a couple, getting on the same page, but because you have these different businesses, you have these different ventures, you're saying, hey, we want to treat it all. We want to make sure that we're on the same page. We want to get a snapshot of the financials. We want to say, hey, how are we doing on our goals for the year? How are we, all of those things. I think that's critical because so many people are just, to a degree, being very, they're wandering, they're very aimless. They're like, hey, someone will come up and say, hey, I want to buy 10 houses. And then by June, I'm like, well, what have you done? They're like, well, not much. It's that idea of the checking in brings accountability, right? The fact that you guys have, do bookkeeping on your personal finance is huge. So many people, they may be meticulous with their businesses, but their personal is a mess, right? So that stuff, I absolutely love that. I think that's brilliant. And I can see how it allows you guys to go divide and conquer when you both know what's up. And so now moving on from there, so you guys come back in, you've got rentals, you're doing these flips, you're doing the rentals. At what point did you start getting into more than just long-term rentals? You started doing either the vacation rentals or the short-term rentals or the rent by the room models.
So
Which one came first?
rent by the room, I think. I mean, kind of about the same time. And I think it's really critical to indicate, everything shifted based on the economy. Yeah. So people think, oh, this is my goal and I'm going to be doing this forever and it's going to be, well, the world around us changes and we have to change with it. I haven't bought a single family single family rental in probably 7 years.
Wow.
Everything has shifted. That's used to be the only thing I bought. And then I bought those as well as I did a lot of flips. And now I'm not buying flips at all because the market isn't there for it. Yeah. And I have bought really everything that I am doing right now is rent by the room. I use...
the co-living model is a great one.
Yeah, co-living, exactly. That's the way
a lot of people, let's clearly define what that looks like because a lot of people... I've heard a lot of people confuse this with, so we'll talk about, who y'all utilize with that. But you have people who are like, sober living, you got different things like that, or, assisting living, things like that. Can you clarify what co-living looks like and then what model y'all are using?
Sure. Go ahead.
Well, there's a lot of these, what I call affinity models, whether it's the veterans, the kids aging out of foster care, the sober living, the recently out of jail. We stuck more on the affordable housing workforce side. We were introduced early on to Pad Split, a company that was founded here in Atlanta, and we have worked with them considerably. And like others, we prune our portfolio regularly, and we sat down early once we had done a house or two on this model and realized this has real power to it, and there's a multiple of traditional earnings that we can get from this.
As well as a great way to help others.
Well, so let's break that down because people say
1031 into them.
So you're looking at your portfolio and saying, hey, these properties aren't doing so well.
It's not so much that they're not doing well. It's they would fit very well into adjusting this to make it, to make more rooms so that people can share a kitchen, share a laundry room, share a common area, and yet have their own space, their own room that is their little apartment, so to speak, and share everything else. So, because you go into, the average apartment right now in Atlanta for a single bedroom, just one bedroom, one bath home, you're talking $1,600 plus certain utilities. Well, people who work at, you know,
Whatever
make
wage,
15 bucks an
minimum wage,
hour or whatever, they're having a very difficult time. They can't qualify for it.
So affordable housing is such a crisis in
It is.
America, and it's, especially with all the recent money printing and everything happened with inflation, it's only going to grow.
Correct.
Right? Like that, that train has left the station. There's no stopping it. There's only how do we try to bring some solutions
Right.
to assist, because it's not going away. So I think that this is one of the most critical models towards helping with affordable housing, because so many people, somewhere along the lines, people have been conditioned to believe that, renting a 2-bedroom house is the first step for everyone, or getting that 3-bed 2-bath house can be, it's the idea that you don't need to have roommates. It's this idea that generational living is like kind of frowned upon, but
we're the only ones we're just the ones in the United States believe that. There are hundreds. I mean, all the other countries, so many of them, it is generational living.
Generational living, all these things to keep their expenses low. So there's that very strong independence. And they think that success, there's this level of my first place, or the place I'm living in, has to be this big place. And with that comes this ability to not be able to afford it. So whatever all that thinking looks like is, people are struggling for that. And so the idea of rent by the room, it allows people to, so you're saying an average, 1-bedroom, 1-bath apartment is 1,600 plus utilities, right? Certain utilities. What would an average rent by the room potentially look like?
An average for me in my suburb area, and it varies by house and it varies by the size of the room, but usually it's right around $175 a week, including all utilities, hi-fi internet, power, gas, sewer, everything. Lawn care, everything is taken care of.
So it's less than $1,000 a month.
Big time.
Big time. And so this is huge. So they're getting their own room, and it's in a house.
In a neighborhood.
These are very nice neighborhoods. We would live in. We don't own one that we wouldn't ourselves live into or feel comfortable putting our kids into, and we've seen.
So they're getting great locations, right? Great school districts, or whatever that puts them in good part of town, right? And so then your model is the workforce, right? So,
or for the most part, we do have.
It's surprising.
We have people on Social Security that live in our places.
Just fixed incomes.
Fixed incomes.
You don't
absolutely.
see a single profile. I think that's been one of the surprising lessons for us. But we've seen wonderful stories as well. I mean, just this weekend we had a fellow move out after 3 years?
He'd been in my home for 3.5 years, and he just bought his
first house
home.
Because he'd saved up enough money to do that.
And we were thrilled for him. I was just thrilled.
So the idea, so I know my understanding is Pad Split. They started here in Atlanta. Would you say a management and a advertisement company? How would you
think of them like Airbnb, because that's where they're going.
It's a hosting.
Yes,
it's
a hosting platform.
So basically, people could go and look on their site and find out what are the available rooms to rent. Right?
Correct.
So thinking of them like that, and this is something they're in. I don't know if they're in every market, but they're for sure in a lot of the major markets. I know they're in New Orleans.
In the last 2 years, are probably entered good 15, 20 markets now.
Probably a lot in Florida,
Sunbelt.
a lot in Sunbelt.
I first heard about it was in Tampa, and then it was Tampa and Atlanta that I was hearing about it with friends who were doing it. And so if you think about it, so you have a normal 3-bedroom house. Are you doing any additional improvements to the house to convert more bedrooms?
Yes, for
What
the
does that
most
look
part
like?
we do. So depending on the house structure, layout, whatever, we've found something that works for us, like a split entry or a split level works the best, and then you divide that, say, for example, the dining room, which nobody uses, you turn
Not
into a
anymore.
bedroom. Because these houses were built in the 70s, 80s, maybe even the 90s. Nobody has a formal dining room anymore.
No.
So you shut it off, and you make that a bedroom. Some of them have, we've made bedrooms in the basements and garages. And you have So my average is about 6 bedrooms in a house.
Oh, wow.
6
That were
bedrooms, sometimes
previously, like,
7.
that were previously
3-2.
three.
Now it's like a 6-3.
A lot of people get intoxicated and try to go more. We discourage that.
Yeah.
You start to see problems once you get 7, 8 more people. You've got parking and other issues as well, but this has worked really well, and the numbers are nice.
Well, I can imagine the numbers are nice. And so, any municipality issues?
You can, depending on where you are. Cities obviously have more problems than county.
Because of densities. Yeah.
Density, and also they have more regulations in cities usually. All of ours are in county. You do non-HOA neighborhoods. You do it in, family-friendly B-class neighborhoods.
Ever have any issues with like neighbors that are just, how they're seeing it?
Normally, only on one house I have, but normally no, because you're making sure that the house, you have enough parking. Okay, so you're going to need to put in a parking pad, and you're going to need to make sure that the lawn is mowed and that things look good. And
It's one of the better maintained houses in the neighborhood.
Yeah, if
usually.
you're taking
And
care
so
of
it
those
becomes
things.
more hospitality?
Yes.
So what's the idea of rent by the week? Is that because people may be more transient, or is it just people can afford paying rent weekly versus monthly?
It's both, because people, when they come into a pad split opportunity like that, they choose the day that they're paying rent.
Okay.
So they can line it up with their paycheck. So every other Friday, or every second Wednesday. However, some people are paid every Friday and want to pay on the Friday.
Okay.
Some people are every other Friday. Some people are Wednesdays. It just kind of really depends.
So for investors who are used to receiving, rent being due by the 1st and being due, late on the 5th, and their mortgage is considered late on the 15th, what are your recommendations for an investor who, for example, may be dependent on rent to be able to pay the mortgage if you're not receiving it all at the same time? Or
Well, in our case, we're working with Pad Split, and they are a platform that remits monthly. And so it's more like a traditional model in that regard.
Okay, so you receive...
Pad Split's living on the float in the interim.
Correct.
Got it. Okay. So they're doing management for y'all.
Yes.
Okay.
As far
No,
as
tenants-
collecting monies and fees at that point, and then remitting them to us. But management, as far as
Like
any
day-to-day, like repairs and tenant, like communication, that's
tenant
y'all.
communication, they do a little bit of, but most of it is held by the host.
Okay, so then they're floating that, the variety of arrival dates of money, but they're remitting it at once. Okay, that's fair. So now, are you offering these furnished? It sounds like you're offering the utilities to make
Fully
that.
furnished. Come with your sheets, that's it.
Okay, yeah. And then so you guys, have you been converting other? It sounds like you said some rentals you converted, but did you go and convert all of your rentals that way? Did you convert some? What did that look like?
This is where she was smart. I mean, step one was looking at what you already have.
Yeah.
As Pete Fortunato would say, what do you have already? What can you work from? We knew that some of the houses were amenable. Other houses that we were likely to prune anyway, for phase 2, we targeted and we say, okay, let's phase 1, convert existing that are suitable. Phase 2, of the ones that are outside the geographic area or other things that would put them on the list to be pruned next year.
Meaning
We'll
prune,
replace
what do you mean
them.
by that? Like, hey, you're going to sell
When you want
it.
to upgrade, you want to sell something, it's a little too far out, the neighborhood's not going the right direction, or this or that,
Yeah, we're having a hard
every
time keeping it
year.
rented for some reason,
Yes.
whatever.
Yeah,
Yes.
and we've rarely had those problems because she manages well. So for us, it's constant. It's more of a question of upward optimizing.
Okay.
And so we've said, all right, so that one's a little further out. Let's buy something closer, 1031, into something that's suitable for a pad split, and then we'd find a co-living suitable property, and exchange into it, and
at
then
that point-
convert it over.
At that point, you guys you're still buying with the discount, buying deals, right? What I find is that some people, when there's an elevated income, they think, well, I can just go pay retail.
No.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, you could in this model. In some cases, we have not. We have chosen not to.
Some do, but I just don't find that's very smart, because you can't base I personally do not believe it's a good idea to base your purchasing on what you're going to be able to earn if it's a multiple of things. You've got to take your very lowest rate of return. So for example, if I couldn't rent this as a pad split, or I couldn't rent this as an Airbnb,
Let's say some
short-term
municipal, laws
they
come into
came in
place.
and they said, nope, sorry, you can only rent this as a single family home. I have to calculate my deal structure, how I buy that on, I can only rent it for, let's just say, $1,500 a month.
If it doesn't accommodate multiple exit strategies, we don't do it.
Yeah,
Well,
and it really has to.
I think that's critical because some people, they hear, they start doing the math. They're saying, wait, 6 to 7 rooms, and you're getting this much a week, on average, and they're starting to do the numbers, and then they're like, well, I'm just now going to go on a buying frenzy. But the reality is that don't throw sound investing out the door.
Well, and that's what's happened with a lot of short-term rentals right now. People, all of a sudden, the short-term rental market has really dried up. And all of a sudden, the people had done their calculations on renting, let's say, 25 nights in a month at X amount. They can't pay their mortgages anymore.
Right.
Because they did it calculating on a very high return, and you cannot do that and want to stay afloat in the real estate business, I believe.
I think that's a problem for a lot of young investors. You get excited about something, you become intoxicated with possibilities on paper without realizing what actually goes into it.
Sure.
So there's a lot of people that have rushed into the co-living kind of space that are finding their way back out of it, just like we're seeing in the Airbnb and other areas. It is, if you're looking at the spectrum of passive to active income, it is more active than a traditional single-family rental.
Because of that bit of hospitality.
Yes, and turnover.
There's turnover.
You have
and
more turnover.
They could be there just for the week.
Well, the minimum I think is 30 days.
Okay.
But they could be there for 30 days. They could be there for a year. They could be there for
Multiple.
2 years, 3 years. But they also might be there for 6 weeks, which I've had too. So there is more turnover. You've got to turn over rooms. You've got to make sure those rooms are clean. You have to vet people in and out. So it's not as much as an Airbnb. I should say short-term rental. It's not as much as a short-term rental that can be in and out in 3 or 4 days, but it's definitely more work than a single-family rental. That's for darn sure.
Well,
interestingly, you don't see the wear and tear that you'd think. It doesn't correlate in the way that most people assume. There's lesser wear and tear than you get often on a single-family residential, but there is more effort required to maintain it because it's more of a hospitality kind of thing.
Correct.
And if you want the kinds of returns that Lisa gets because of how she manages, it requires more effort. So she'll pass through the place every 7 to 10 days. They know she's on top of things. She gets things repaired immediately, and so they love her because of how she cares for the product and them.
And they'll stay around. And so what do you think with this model? What are some misconceptions? So we already talked about people who, over speculate and they buy, at retail just thinking that this higher income is going to be guaranteed. Anything else that you think people kind of, these myths or misconceptions with it?
I think part of it is every market is different. The Atlanta market is going to be different than the Tampa market.
Sure.
Than the
Even the
New Orleans market.
Yep.
And I think talking to people within that market that have already done deals is really important because you can be oversaturated in certain pockets. For example, in Florida, your insurance there for hurricanes and so forth has just skyrocketed.
Yeah, New Orleans too.
Yeah. There you go. And in New Orleans, okay, that is
property
not
taxes, things like that. Yeah.
We do not have hurricanes, knock on wood, in Atlanta, and
Right
so
now,
we don't have that cost.
Yeah.
But you're talking about if you're going into other markets, you might have a cost that you might not be aware of.
Right.
And that's another reason I believe in investing locally and in home, but that's just my own personal
It's hard to
way
attempt
to
this.
do it.
It's hard to attempt this remotely.
I agree, and
some
people
people
want
do.
to, and I know that's a
There's
possibility. But
there's this infatuation with doing everything virtual.
yes,
And I don't know fully what's all about that, meaning so many people, they'll say, hey, whether it's wholesaling, whether it's flipping, whether it's rentals, whether it's this stuff, where it's more co-living, short-term rental, whatever. Oh, I want to do it virtual. And I'm like, you open yourself to a ton more risk
Yep.
when you do that. That might just be the control freak in me speaking, but that's also someone who, I mean, when I go, an hour outside my market to a new market, there's a huge learning curve. And
Absolutely.
so when people say, hey, I'll do this anywhere across the nation, I'm like,
Well, there's irrational exuberance about possibilities. And when it comes to arbitrage, people sometimes simplistically think, oh, it's cheaper over there, to acquire, and therefore I will do it there. Well, it's going to be it's not going to be cheaper to maintain and to service. And they say, oh, well, we'll just hire that out with a property management company or a specialized one. There's no more luck in property management companies in the co-living space than there is in property management companies for the single family space. It's really hard to do it, and then your margins disappear, and people don't think that through when they get intoxicated with what they think the numbers are.
yeah.
Right. And I think, that's really critical. And I think coming back to knowing your market, that is so critical. I invest in 3 counties.
Yeah.
3 counties in Atlanta, okay? I mean, I've sold in other counties and just said, you know what? The judges are different there.
Yep.
The people are different there. It's not my cup of tea. And so there's, Metro Atlanta is like 17 counties.
Yeah.
I invest in only 3 of them,
Yeah.
and I won't go in certain ones. And so, when I say knowing your market, it is really a niche, and that's okay. And people go, oh, I want to do it here. I want to do it there. Why is that such an infatuation? Well, you can make just as much money and be be around your own market and in your own market and know it very well.
And I think sometimes people get caught up in the notion of owning lots and lots of assets. It's like there's bragging rights. I've got X dozen properties or X hundred properties. And I'm like, whoop-de-doo, what's your equity?
Yeah.
What's your return? What's your cash flow on it? And some people, unfortunately, we discussed over breakfast, a friend of yours who's had those difficulties because he went too fast, too quick.
Yeah.
We've seen that with dear friends here, too fast, too quick, because they thought they had to do something.
Yeah.
And instead of doing it, slowing down a little bit, doing it smart, structuring it right, making sure the numbers really work, not over leveraging, you end up in very different places.
Yeah, I think that's critical because, as we mentioned, someone could have 500 properties, and the question is, are you impressed? Well, maybe, and I think a lot of young investors are like, oh wow, but I find that almost all experienced investors are not.
Yeah.
First of all, and then the second thing is well, what if I told you they were losing $100 a month? Well, then would you still be impressed? The hope is not.
Right.
Right. And it's the idea of what metrics are you chasing? Mm-hmm. It's kind of the vanity thing of how many followers do you have online. It's stuff like that. But so all right, so you guys predominantly these days, what are the main things that you guys are doing with investing? What does that look like as far as existing and maybe what you might be
I'd say
starting to
we're
explore?
more in maintenance mode, and some would say we're entering into ender mode. It's you do this to support life, not vice versa. And we suddenly have, 6 grandchildren nearby, and under 6, kind of thing. And
Staying busy.
yeah, it puts just a different priority on life. And so we're not as crazy chasing things. There's not the need because we've done things smart before. We're in safe positions. And we can go down like anyone else can go down. But we'll probably hold out a bit longer because of the beachheads we built around us to protect. I mean, do you see this differently?
No, I think we're in maintenance mode. We do have quite a few co-living properties now, which, I manage those.
Yeah.
And we do have the lake house here, and we just bought 2 other ones right close to us.
We'll talk about that. Yeah.
That, one of them we're turning into short-term rental. And we're in maintenance. I have not found good flips right now, but then I have to say I haven't been really looking. So I'm not saying that there aren't any out there. I'm just saying that's not something that I have been chasing right now.
Well, I think it's fair. A lot of people, flipping is good and fun. Same with wholesaling, but at the end of the day, it's not a long-term strategy.
No, it's not.
Everyone gets burnt out on it. And so, all right, so one last question for you about the co-living before we jump in and talk about the lake houses. And so when you're getting this elevated income, what are your thoughts on debt with rental properties? do you get that elevated income and do you go siphon it toward the mortgage and pay it down so you're free and clear? Well, like what do you, what does that look like? Because some people say, oh, hey, when I have this elevated income, that's just going to be great. Now I'm either going to, but overall, question is with that, elevated income, what do you, where are you throwing it into debt? And then overall, what's your belief on debt with rentals?
I know you'll want to come to this and talk about this, but I think it's fair to say one of the things that we try and do is we do not believe in being slumlords. And so with that elevated income, I know we have tried to put back into the property, whether that's it's not just maintenance, it's trying to
Upgrades.
improve,
Yeah.
trying to upgrade, trying to make sure that, again, if I wouldn't live there, nobody should live there.
Lisa's always offered a product that's above market and then rented it slightly below market and been extremely careful in her vetting of candidates and who she places into it.
Right.
And as a consequence, I mean, we still have in our very first rental home in this area the very same tenants, and that's 20.
He's been there, this is his 20th year.
20th year.
Wow.
Okay, and
Yeah.
that's a tribute to her management and making sure that she's offering that kind of a product. But to
Yeah.
your question on debt, I know it's a big topic for a lot of people now.
Well, sure, because even, and not to interrupt you, but debt in general, some people are either aggressive or they believe of arriving to a place. You guys say you're in maintenance mode, right? They're thinking of, well, when I get to my maintenance mode season, I'm going to have free and clear properties. I'm going to be, so what does that look like for you? How have you approached debt to help you get here?
I think you need to look at it as a spectrum, okay? And where you reside at a particular point in time has lots of different factors that determine what the safe place is. And so it becomes a question of what range are you comfortable with in that spectrum, 100% paid off versus 100% leveraged.
Yeah.
Okay, there's been some excellent studies out there in the academic world that talk about high net worth individuals typically stay in the 40 to 60% range. You can go up to 80% at given times if you're doing opportunistic things, et cetera. We have tended to stay in the 20 to 60% kind of range. I am a huge fan of arbitrage through lines of credit. And so I have different places where I can park my money where it's effectively earning money at any given time. There are certain mortgage products that we have on some of our properties that are so low that I don't think I'll ever pay them off because it's so cheap. I'd be foolish
the debt
not
was
to.
real low.
Yeah, because the debt was low.
3%.
So,
Yeah.
3% for 30 years, why walk away from that when if you've got any experience in real estate, you ought to be able to do a multiple of that at any given time. And so you can create a spread. There's that arbitrage opportunity. And so I don't have a precise answer for you on it. We try to stay in that range.
No, I
These days we're
appreciate
on the
that,
lower end of it because we're not finding the opportunities that we would want to put our money into. I'm looking at alternative things and possibly buying other businesses. My mind has been in the world of putting younger people into other businesses for some time. How much further we'll go down that path, we'll see. We've done some of it already where we provide more financing and gray hair advisory services to it. But, so there's opportunities outside of real estate, but the fundamentals remain. It's a question of returns versus loan constants versus, level of debt to assets. And if you can create spreads in any industry, then you ought to be doing that.
Yeah.
And thinking in terms of cash flow. At the end of the day, cash flow is king. We talk a lot in terms of orchards in our family, and I tell my kids who are now, marrying and having their own children, they need to be thinking about planting their orchards yesterday. And I don't care what kind of orchard it is. If it's a fruit orchard, apples, pears, peaches, whatever, or if it's a nut orchards, walnuts, pecans, or whatever, you choose whatever type of orchard speaks to you.
Whether that's
And-
real estate,
Yeah,
business.
so for us, we have some orchards that are real estate. A portion of it is single family residential, a portion of it's co-living. Related to that is the neighboring orchard that's private loans. Other orchards, active businesses that others are operating.
Yeah.
You know, and so we talk in those terms. We talked last night about my son-in-law who's been flipping boats and golf carts and jet skis and other things as he starts out because he's at a different capital level. And we all start in different places, but he's learning the fundamentals of trading and creating spreads, using the skills that he has and the resources he has, using what he has to get what he needs, to get what he wants.
Yeah.
And so we talk in those vocabularies, and we try to encourage younger generations to think that way, that ultimately cash flow is the answer, and cash flow independent of your labor.
Well, I think that's critical. Cash flow independent of your labor. That's critical, because at the end of the day, at any given point, our ability to labor may be impaired. And so to have cash flow coming in that's not dependent on you getting up and going and clocking in, or getting in and going and doing that flip or whatever, it's having your money make money for you. Where, you know, it's not necessarily depending on you going out and doing it. So I think that's critical.
And the fundamental skills are the same regardless of the number of zeros behind the project.
Right.
And so
That foundation
anyone
needs to
can
be
start
critical.
wherever they are at.
Well, I mean, I started with flipping, you know, I remember my dad introduced me to the local auction house, and back when I was a CrossFit coach, he said, hey, there's a whole bunch of weights in here. And it was from one of the local public schools, and they had renovated their
Gym?
weight room
Okay.
for the football players, like, so their weight room, and then they put all the old stuff outside. So it was rusted weights, you know, stuff like that. And so they just threw it in the auction house. And I remember I went and bought a few thousand pounds of weights, a big old rig that had 8 bays, some different machines, huge dumbbells, just all this stuff for $440. And somehow convinced my father to help me move it into my very first deal was a condo that had a very large garage and like 15-foot ceilings, because the condo was on top. And so we just stacked all those weights in there. And at first I was like, oh, let me go get all the rust off of them. Like, I was thinking I'm going to buy all these Cokes and see if I can get the rust. And then I just said, wait, no. I just post them. I think I made $1,500 in 2 days profit after getting my $440 back and some money from my father. But just getting all those things. And I just remember being like that's a paycheck, you know, or a portion of it, right? And it was that level of knowing how to see opportunity and know that, number one, there's demand for it. Because if I would have bought, you know, 1,000 books that were Swedish about, I don't know, making tackle. Well, if there's not a demand for that book, then I just have inventory, right? Even if the book's a $20 book and I got them all for a penny, you know what I mean? It's, if there's no demand for it, what is the value of that discount? You know, and so that goes back to the housing thing, where, you know, especially these co-living places, you said, hey, be careful of it being saturated. Even though affordable housing is a problem, if there's not demand in that certain area, right? And so those things, I think.
Well, there was I think there was another interesting lesson in that story you just told. Whether it's dumbbells or real estate, you found the opportunity because you were familiar with the market. You weren't afraid to go after it. Someone who trusted you, had known you, trusted you, had some resources. Sounds like Dad tossed some money on the table on that one. I tell young
more
people.
So just told me where the thing was, but yeah.
Okay, but I tell young people all the time,
Yep.
don't worry about the money. If you find the right deal, the allies will come. If you're out there networking and you're letting people know what it is you're trying to do, they know you're sincere, they know you're credible, they know you're serious, you're looking at it the hard ways, they will come, whether it's with money, whether it's with advice, telling you, well, don't do that for these reasons, or charge ahead and here's some money on the table, I'll participate in the deal.
Yes, yeah.
And I think there's even another lesson there. It was a win-win. It was a win for you, and it was a win for somebody else who really wanted those weights and got it for a discount.
Yeah.
And that's what I look at for co-living. It's a win for the landlord, but it's really a win for all those tenants who are like, I can't afford a $1,500, $1,600 one-bedroom apartment,
Right.
but I can afford this, and I can put away money to save it for whatever that is, starting a business, buying a home, even getting credible a car. You know, anything, it can be a win-win for both. And if you look at those opportunities so that it's a benefit to both sides, it's such a gratifying thing.
Well, it is, and so let's start talking about the lake house deals, because one of my philosophies on real estate is that it's either a win-win or we don't do it, right? And people think that is foolish thinking, that you can't do deals that are win-wins for everyone. So so we're sitting here in you guys' beautiful lake house. We had the privilege of staying here last night, got to see the great sunset. We went on the lake, ate some great food. But this is, first of all, a view that people would, really, they'd really, I'm not going to say die for, but it's what is on vision boards, right? And then somehow you guys got not only one property, a coveted property on a coveted point for this lake, but then you somehow managed to get the adjoining properties. And like you said, the people in the area are, they're wondering, scratching their head how you did it, right? So let's talk about, what are some of to what degree you want to share about the deal, you're more than welcome to share. But let's talk about some of the takeaways people can learn from these deals.
I think the first thing was, and I know, I wanted this for a long, long time. And I think it's okay to say, this is my goal.
Yeah.
And it may be a goal that comes literally 20, 30 years later. But it can be something that you dream of, and it's something that you work for, and it's something that you always have in mind. It's on your vision board, if you want to call it that. I mean, for us, we named our business Lakeshore Retirement LLC before we even were living here again.
An LLC behind a Roth IRA that no one would ever see.
Yeah, exactly.
But 20 years ago, it planted the idea.
But it was something that you would see, right?
Yes.
And it was that shared
retirement.
language.
So it was first of all, knowing that this was having this was something that I wanted since I was a kid. It was a goal that we had. So it was keeping that in mind at all times. And so I don't know what else.
Well, we would look for lake property out of state and stuff, thinking it would be something we would use to get away and to Airbnb when we weren't there. She found this one not far from our primary residence, ironically, and she took it down to the studs and blew out the back walls, put in glass, did all the kinds of things that.
Saw the before and afters. You guys, this place is not the same place, not even close.
Well, we bought it for the lot, not for the house.
Yeah.
So that you could do those major improvements and it still makes sense.
And so her talents came out there, and I think, those talents led to the credibility that allowed the rest to happen.
Yeah.
And it was a long-term thing. We've had this now for about 5 years.
Almost 6 now.
Almost 6.
Yeah.
And, the neighbors were in an interesting situation. It was a family that owned the 2 adjacent lots. And there were 2 deaths in the family, the mother and the daughter, and suddenly the poor son-in-law who's, entering his 70s and wanting to move to Florida is got 2 houses he's dealing with and a special needs brother-in-law, and it's got, probate and estates and special needs trust and all of that messiness that he had to deal with. And we just let him know early on, if your family would ever consider selling, we'd like to have the same kind of experience for our children that you've had with your family, to create the same kind of memories.
Right.
And so that's been a consistent message over the years. And then, one thing led to another, and we helped them over the years. We made them aware of issues when he discovered things on the property, and we taught him through, here's ways you might think about it.
Sure.
And when he was thinking about sell, we helped them recognize that there were 7 or 8 categories of things that were going to be very expensive and very long to fix.
And sticky.
And it would take a specialized buyer to do that, and we'd be happy to either advise them as he went, or if they were open to selling to us, that we would happily, put something together. But, they knew that Lisa could create something out of what they had. And that was bad hoarder, bad all kinds of stuff from 50 years of neglect.
They've got these homes that are tied to family emotion, all that, and they see you take something that looked very similar to their homes, but I saw the photos, but I don't know the full story, and then you turn it into what this is here, which is so gorgeous. And so that right there is one, I mean, people, I mean, by and large, there's a high level of respect with that.
Yeah, it's the credibility factor.
It's that credibility factor. They see that transformation. But then you're planting seeds.
Yeah, I think it's
All
fair to
along.
say that, I mean, we started talking to them 5+ years ago and just saying, hey, if you ever do want to sell, we're right here. We would like to, you know, have next door right there on the point,
Right.
and that one that you also own, you know, this little peninsula. And it was 5 years of talking to them.
Planting
and
seeds,
just
yeah.
saying, hey, when you're ready, we're
And
happy to help. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't.
Yeah.
You know, but if we can create something that would work for you and work for us, then we would love to structure something like that. We want it to be good for you. If it isn't, then it won't work, and we respect that, and I understand that.
And I think they respected the vision. They first saw the family desire, that
Yeah.
we wanted kind of a compound, so to speak, with the kids. But they also knew that we had this aspiration to make this a place where siblings separated by the foster care systems could reunite
And come together
for
So-
day events, weekend events, etc. And they respected that, and I think they wanted to be a part of that. And so as their situation intensified and became more difficult, and we laid out for them, I said, you know, here's how an investor would think about this. You know, I'm very optional. I'll come up with a dozen ways to look at a problem. She's very procedural, and that's why I say get out of her way once she sees where she's going, and it makes for a good team. But you know, for me to be able to lay out to them, here's alternative ways that you could look at the property and how this might be done. That made, and 5 years of listening to their problems and knowing what the family was going through, it allowed us to create probably the best deal of our career, that has probably 6 or 7 very basic elements. I mean, we didn't go exotic in what we did with them, but we put together 5, 6, 7 different basic things in terms of how those properties ultimately transferred to us.
Yeah.
And I think it's fair to say, you know, Pete always says something like, you know, find the real problem. What is the real problem? And I think that's what we really tried to come up and talk to them about. I mean, the real problem, they needed to put a family member in
Assisted living.
yeah, an assisted living care facility, and that's expensive. It's about
very
$6,000 a month.
Yeah.
For all the needs and medicine and meals and all that kind of stuff. And we said, okay, how can we structure that so we're taking care of that part of your concern, which is the
Right.
biggest part of the concern.
And that's huge. So you guys ultimately did this deal with creative financing, also some cash, you know, and which is important because some people think that if it's not no money down, and you know, just basically home runs, that it's not a great deal. But you guys did include some cash, but that came from a 1031 of a property that you bought how many years before?
We bought a property in 2012 for $44,000. We sold it for $272,000. We did that. We took that as a 1031 and took we kept 22 of it, and so we put $250 into this home. They needed it as a 1031.
neighboring.
As a
And so you
1031.
moved money over, and what's critical here is that, again, some people would be like, oh, well, if they need that type of money, I'm not doing this. Like they shut down, but understand, you know, call it a down payment, call it that cash infusion can solve problems. And my friend Maria says that, you know, down payments can solve problems, and I think that's so critical because if you're too rigid to where it's like, hey, if it's no money down, what? But essence, you guys, it wasn't necessarily your money. It was money coming from a previous deal,
Well,
right?
it was a $40,000 seed 10 years ago that
Yeah.
enabled the transaction a decade later. And that portion of the transaction spoke to the legitimate need that the 3 heirs, the son-in-law and his 2 adult children, had, which if they are going to transfer 2 properties with very big price tags on the market, you know, it makes sense that they have something to show out of it. So I don't care if they took the $85,000 a piece and went and blew it in the Bahamas or Vegas. You know, they had that satisfaction. Meanwhile, we've got a 30-year note on 2 properties at a attractive interest rate. That's a walkable piece of paper that they know if they ever need to come back to us for cash or other things, because the assisted living thing adjusts, that we've already demonstrated the creativity that they'll do that, and they trust us enough.
Yeah.
And so, that's a beautiful thing
Well,
in
and
terms
it's
of that
not
aspect
just
of
the
the relationship.
creativity, it's that you solved a problem and you tailored it to help them.
That's
Right?
fair.
Because people can be creative all day long. The renovation of this home can be creative. But if it's only to one end, meaning self-serving, but for the fact that when you say, hey, I'm here to help, and listen to their situation, hey, I recently had a closing where the seller, originally, an agent brought the deal to me because, the woman inherited, she was in California, inherited these properties in Louisiana from her dad, a number of properties. And she walked into a brokerage and said, hey, I need you to help me sell these properties, but you can't put it on the market. You can't put a sign outside. You can't put it on the internet. You can't put it on the MLS. Because she was the only heir, but had other family members who thought they were entitled, they thought they would have basically inherited it too. And so she wanted them to stay out of her business. And they all lived around the properties, small town type of thing.
Sure.
They didn't, so all that would bring attention to it, involve them in her dealings and her business. So that agent knew to call me, and I structured deals, and I bought those properties. And then when I went to close, we made sure that it was $10 in considerable goods. We could do that in Louisiana. We put that on the deeds so that no matter what, like it still respected what she, and
Yes.
she just stopped and she said, you haven't stopped looking out for me. And that, that's powerful, right?
And she will come back to you if she ever has another deal.
Because she has other ones, and she said, we inked on those, and then literally turned around after the closing, turned to the agent and said, I think I'm ready to sell her my other ones too.
That's sweet.
Yeah.
And so,
See, I almost wish we could take that word creative out of the description of what happened over there.
Yeah.
Because the elements of what we did were not exotic. They weren't particularly creative.
Yeah.
Yes, there was a 1031 where we brought some money to the table. And yes, there was seller finance there. And yes, we tweaked it in a couple of ways that we'd get some benefits. And yes, it was a contingent contract and there was a lease purchase, et cetera, on the front end. But none of those on their own are complex things.
Yeah.
A first-year real estate investor can carry off any one of those transactions. But after 20 years of doing things, we weren't afraid to, in a mini Pete way, of saying, hey, we can stack some of these together
yeah.
and
all these
meet
different
their
options
need.
together.
Every
Yep.
single one of those tweaks met
Met.
a need that family had.
Yeah.
And so I would never, at the supermarket or at church or anywhere else that I would run into those people, feel bad in any way about that deal because everyone benefited.
Yep. And I think so, and that's so critical. And this is what the fast cash, also virtual people generally miss, right? It's this idea of let me come in, make that low cash offer. Well, when you're not like a quick low cash offer cannot always solve the problem. And here you had to use multiple tools to solve the problem. And the fact that you were willing, again, you guys have 3 great, lots, multiple, improvement structures on these lots. You have the docks, you have the fantastic point here. And that is a testament to y'all's patience, your ability to problem solve, look at different ways, but then also to be able, the fact that you even planted the seed saying, hey, I have interest. I have interest in this. If you guys ever look to sell, some people think it, but then they never say it and they get mad when it gets sold to someone else, especially if it got sold at a discount to someone else, right? You guys saw the situation. It was a hoarder situation. They ended up becoming probate. These are the things that where it's normal that it sells to an investor with all the deferred maintenance. I mean, I saw the jacks that were holding up the house on the outside that had been there for 20 years?
At least.
Yeah, so tons of deferred maintenance, various things. So, all of that is, again, testament to you guys paying attention, making it known, hey, I'm here to help. There's various ways that it can help. Helping them, even before you did the deal, you were sowing seeds helping. And so I think that's critical. Now, you've started to mention it and you pointed, so this is Reunion Point, right?
That's what we christened the peninsula.
Yeah, so it's Reunion Point. Real quick, as we start to wind this down, tell us again your heart behind this, and then talk about how the flyers you were showing me earlier. Yeah.
75% of children, multiple children, when they go into foster care, are separated
From their siblings.
from their
of
siblings.
Sibling groups.
Yeah. So the only person, so they're already separated from parents, but then the only person or persons that they have come to really know and
their support
trust,
system,
their
yeah.
support system, is their siblings, and they're separated from them.
Yeah.
And that is a scary. It's
heartbreaking.
treacherous
Yeah.
for them. It's so scary, and so we have made this place available for those reunions, so that when those children come back from multiple families, it can be 2, 3, sometimes 4 families, come here to the lake to go swimming, to go fishing, to go out canoeing or paddleboarding. They are reuniting themselves together with their support system and having a great time on the lake. That helps them have some carefree time together.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's heartbreaking when you think about.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't expect emotion. But you take them out of everything that's familiar, their schools, their churches, their teachers, and then you take them away from their siblings. And so, that's just the notion, is to provide a place where they can reunite for safe space, so that when they age out of the system, that thin safety net that society provides, which is not sufficient in most cases, if you look at the social statistics behind what happens to children who age out of foster care solo. But if they at least have their siblings with them as a team, there's a lot that they can tackle together. So it's our hope that we can provide a place where some of that, those strengths, those relationships can be reinforced.
I absolutely love it. I'm here to support it. So let's talk about that. So first of all, you guys have some short-term rentals here with more that are being renovated for the new acquisitions. Talk about how that supports that overall vision and goal.
We have a website where you can go to. It's called, because we started our own 501c3. Yeah. It's called A Ladder, as in climbing a ladder up. Yeah. So it's to help. Ladderup.org or .com? .org. Ladderup.org. And it's to help people climb that ladder and have a support system. Yeah. And we have donations there that we take for these kinds of activities. Those reunions, because it does,
There's costs with you're
obviously
allowing them to come here. Are they, so when they come here, I know you guys have partnered with some local charities
that specifically help with foster care.
And so then they're hosting events. You guys have one coming up, here this summer, where they're going to host, these charities are going to host an event here at you guys' vision board lake house, dream lake house, but it has duality in its purpose, right? So of course you guys are going to enjoy it and all those things, but it has such deeper fulfillment and meaning as well.
It does, and these kids that are coming next month, they're at-risk kids for sure. Okay, they need to see themselves as more than just
someone everyone's forgotten.
Yeah, and it is hey, you need to graduate from high school. Okay, let's get you to the next step. See, you can be more. You can do more. Yeah. You can accomplish more. You have skills. Let's get you trained. Let's get you pointed in the right direction. Yeah. And it's a great thing to see good things happen out of very sad or frustrating circumstances.
Yeah. So a portion of the proceeds from the Airbnb, the apartment you stayed in last night, and from the new units, goes toward those events as well. I mean, we've underwritten most of it for the last 5 years, and now we're we're diversifying a bit so that we can expand these kinds of operations here. But with 3 properties adjacent, there's a significant amount that potentially can be done in the future. We're not going to full week-long day camp kind of models and that, but there's an awful lot that can be done here with day event, weekend events, and basically providing a form of respite care for 4 siblings, 4 different families, 4 corners of the state. The children come together for a weekend. The parents either get a break off, or they can come together and collaborate together to learn about what the mutual needs are of the sibling group. Yeah. So there's a lot of ways in which this can be played, and we're just grateful that the resources available.
Yes.
So a few ways a few people can contribute. One is just to go to aladderup.org and just donate.
Yes.
And the funds from that is using to help with these types of events. But then the other part is if they were to come and stay, at the short-term rental, part of that, the proceeds from that is going towards it as
Yeah,
well.
come stay here.
Yeah.
Bring
and
your real estate mastermind and use the conference room over the garage.
There is a conference room, and if you guys know me, I've been scheming. So, but whether you're a real estate influencer, real estate educator, and maybe you're saying, hey, I'm looking for a place. And I know you guys are still building that part out, but what do you think as far as capacity for that room?
Well, we'll see in time, but I think you could have a group there easily, 30, 40 people,
Me too.
For sure.
Yeah.
comfortable seating
Comfortable,
and getting
yeah.
around. And there's expansion that's going to occur, and particularly with the other structures. But as you know, there's beautiful.
Very
I'm looking
beautiful
out this
scenery.
way at the
Yeah.
lake, and there's places around the lake here where outdoor things and lunches and stuff can occur. So there'll be some good opportunities. It won't be a
That's excellent.
full-fledged event center under the zoning codes, but it's something that we can.
It's 900
we can
square
accommodate
feet,
events.
so open square feet. So it's
Very
big,
open. No, I absolutely can see the potential with it. So, with that being said, any final thoughts about folks who this podcast is the Strategic Success Podcast, conversations around the next right step. So you guys, you've attained one of those big goals on your vision board. You're in that maintenance mode, things along those lines. Any thoughts about what's next for you guys, or or suggestions for folks who may be saying, okay, I hear what y'all are saying.
Well, the
But
next big
any-
step is getting off the bench if you haven't yet.
Yeah.
And whether that's, flipping a dumbbell set, flipping a golf cart or a jet ski, a boat or a house, but it's getting into your first opportunities and then finding the allies that can help you along your path, and there are plenty there.
And I had a lady ask me, because this was a couple weeks ago, she said, how do you just not be scared anymore of doing that deal? And because her husband's really into it. And I said, you might not be. You might still be scared, but look at the numbers. If the numbers are sound,
Yeah.
and if you go back to the principles to begin with, why are you scared? And so it's getting off the bench, and you may be scared, but look at your numbers. Look at the basis of why you're doing it and what it can provide for the future.
It was a thrill when you sold the dumbbell set and made as much as you would have in a week's worth of work. It was a thrill the first time we paid off our residents. It was a thrill to wake up and recognize I don't have to go to any job again if I don't want to.
Right.
It is a thrill. Each of those steps is, but they come over time.
Yes.
It's not a quick get rich quick kind of approach.
It's not.
But it's steadily planting an orchard and pruning it.
I love the idea of planting the orchard. It's the idea, again, this dream, I can't tell you how much we were dreaming last night, just being here, just talking about things in our future, just saying, hey, look, me 10 years into this, you guys have, more time under your belt under this, but I said, but look at this deal that they bought, X number of years ago was a pivotal part for them to do this deal. And it's just reminding that the seeds you sow today, you never know what it's going to, the harvest that you're going to pull from it, right? Or how it's going to play a role in things in the road. But when, and I've got to fault investors sometimes, they get off, sometimes they either, they get off too soon, as far as get off the ride too soon, where they don't give it the actual time. The fact that you guys gave those properties time, y'all saw some appreciation in this area, that you were able to capture some equity then. And you were saying, hey, look, here's a great opportunity. Let's take this one seed, this $40,000 or $44,000 seed we planted, and then boom, you were able to move it 250 grand into this to capture way more equity, and obviously some prime premium location real estate here. So kudos to you guys for that. And I think that's a critical part, guys. It's important to play both offense and defense, right? Like, you got to get out there and play offense. You have to get in the game. You have to. There's so much that you can learn on YouTube or a podcast, but you so much more that you learn out there doing it, right? In these real estate streets. But at the same time, you've got to do it with sound, insights, sound investing principles. the way you approach it. That's why we talk about the philosophy of how you approach real estate and business and life and money, because at the end of the day, if you don't approach it right, it can bite you just as much, And so I appreciate you guys so much sharing your story. We've absolutely loved staying with you guys. And look, it's been a pleasure. You guys have so much to offer the investing community. So I'm thankful that you guys allowed me some time to really pull some stories out of you.
Well,
we're
thanks.
happy to help.
It's been great to be
I can
chatting
be
it
reached
up.
at Clark Cordner at Gmail, Hotmail, AOL, Yahoo, any of them.
Yep.
Where,
I'm
those are
on, the best way, you can look up my Instagram. It's Lisa's and then _Lakeshore_life.
And I can put those in the
Okay.
in the show notes.
Yeah,
But
sure. And then it has a link on that to the Airbnb,
where people can come if they want to book
where they
a
want to
stay.
book and stay.
Or,
We'd love to
and they
have
can
them.
always go to aladderup.org
Yes,
as well.
yes.
And check those things. But, well, Lisa, Clark, Cordner, you guys, thank you so much. You guys are gems. And guys, thanks so much for tuning in. Make sure if you got value out of this that you share it with friends as well. I know other people can get value out as well. Thank you.
Yep.
It's good having you. Thanks for coming.